Welcome to the Untethering Shame podcast. I'm your host, Kira Wackett, and can I just say, wow, when it comes to today's episode. What are we talking about? Sugar addiction. What it is, how we got here, what keeps us stuck, and how we can begin the process of breaking out of this vicious cycle. My guest today is holistic nutrition coach and speaker Danielle I, who works with women to help them heal their relationship with food and step fully into their power. And can I just say that after meeting her briefly, I think it was maybe a year ago, I was just enamored with her, and I can't wait for her to share who she is with you as we talk about such a vulnerable topic. Her work is centered on uncovering and repatterning the root causes of sugar addiction and helping her clients find a new sense of freedom in their bodies and minds. And as someone who specializes in eating disorders and is in recovery from my own, that repatterning is key. And I can't wait to just dive into that with her today. It's about so much more than sugar itself, but about understanding your relationship with yourself and the depth of your shame that's rendering you feeling powerless and lacking. So whether you struggle with a diagnosed eating disorder, disordered eating, feeling out of control with food, sugar cravings, daily energy crashes, stress, emotional eating, or just want to learn a little bit about building healthy habits that support you in your body, you're in the right place because we're here and we're ready to talk about it. Danielle, I'm so excited. I'm so happy that you're here.
Yay, me too. Thanks for having me on, and congrats on launching the podcast. And
Thank you.
This is going to be incredible.
Yeah, I feel like I'll make sure that I put a link to our episode down in the show notes, because after being a guest on your podcast and just having the chance to connect with you, I was like, oh my goodness. I knew at the time I was going to be posting or starting my podcast, but I was like, I have to have her, because I think one of the things I really appreciate about you is when I started my eating disorder recovery journey and tried to find people in the therapy realm and other sectors to talk about things with, I felt like people were focused on the wrong thing. And I didn't know that at the time because I was new to the recovery process. I was, 18, 19, 20 years old. And people were just sort of pitching it as like, just eat more, be better, do these things, what's going on? I'm like, no, I don't think you understand this is deeper. Like, this is not just your boilerplate. I want to control something, so I'm controlling food. This is my brain. I don't know how to stop my brain from getting where I am, whether that's restricting, binging, whatever that looks like. And so I really appreciate you kind of taking that step back and that step deeper of saying, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the legitimate behavior changes and the cycles that we have in our day to day and how we relate to food, how we're eating food, what food we're putting in our body. But it is so much more than that. It is really about understanding you as a person and how this cycle is your body's way of trying to avoid, protect, defend, whatever it is. And how do we need to heal that? And so I'm curious, as we get started, one of the things I really like to do to kind of center in a conversation is just to think about kind of our word that we're feeling, that we're holding. And so what is one word that you're feeling? Just as you're hearing me get excited about this, as we get ready to launch in, what's one word to describe how you're feeling right now, kind of thinking about this conversation?
Oh, do I have to pick just one word? I've got two.
Okay, good.
So immediately what comes up is freedom and power. Right. And this is really what this is about. And I see with my clients and women, it is really about taking our power back, right? Finding our voice, taking our healing, like the power of our own ability to heal, our own ability to not need to cope and escape with food or whatever substance we're using. And then having freedom, right? So not feeling deprived. I had a call with a client just yesterday, and she was really struggling with this feeling of deprivation. So we had some really deep conversations around that. And ultimately, when we feel free to make choices, and obviously that's a slippery slope with addiction, and we talk about that, we don't feel that deprivation, right? And we can actually live our fullest, expression of life. And I think it's a basic human need, right? To feel free in whatever way, and especially, in some sort of way, depending on what works for you with food.
Yeah. And I think that you're kind of getting into it already with this idea of kind of freedom in opposition to the trapped feeling that can happen in addiction and addiction patterns. So help me. I mean, I think I understand it from the concept of like, my own journey and what it's looked like. And then I can tell you, here's the DSM and what eating disorders look like. And this is what addiction is in the brain. But for people who maybe don't have that, or like, can you just explain it to me plainly? What is sugar addiction and how do you see it? Where does it come from for us? Why is this even a thing that we struggle with?
Yeah. Such a great question. And I'll try to keep the answer brief because there's a lot of nuances and a lot of pieces here. So there's like, where does sugar addiction come from, but also like why the addictive patterns exist. And those are kind of slightly different things. So, in terms of like why this is a problem, right? What is actually sugar addiction? In my understanding, when we think of addiction, and I'm open to your ideas as well, but my understanding it engaging in some sort of behavior or activity or substance abuse that we know is hurting us, but we can't seem to stop, right? So there's kind of this like, I don't want to be doing this thing. It's hurting me, but I can't seem to stop, right? There's something going on in the brain and the body, which I would love to talk about more, right? That really it has that pull, right? And we feel out of control. We don't feel free, right? We feel trapped in this like obsessive patterns with, I know a lot of my clients are thinking about food all day long, thinking about when you're going to get your next hit, right? Like, what am I going to have for after lunch? What kind of snack am I going to have after dessert? So it's this obsession and like mental obsession and obviously physical obsession as well, that in a behavior that we know is damaging, right? And we know is hurting us, whether that's alcohol or sugar or, hard drugs or shopping, and there's lots of different ways. So that's kind of the short description that I would say. And I'll add to that kind of that piece around like why it exists, because I think this is really important, and not to get too far down the political rabbit hole. Right. The unfortunate truth is we do live in a world where big ag and big industries work really hard and actually spend billions of dollars to get us addicted to sugar, to get us addicted to crap food, because they know how addicting it is. And they know that it's going to keep us coming back buying more and keep us sick. I mean, that's a whole nother, side tangent into talking about the pharmaceutical industry and the profits that are being made on getting us sick and then pretending to heal us with magic pills and drugs. Right. So there is that's just an important piece to understand, and please do your own research on that. It can get really dark and scary once we go down that rabbit hole, but it's really important to understand that this isn't your fault. A lot of my clients and women that I work with, feel so much shame, right? Feel so much guilt, feel like they're broken. There's something wrong with me because I can't seem to give up sugar, right? Look, everyone around me is not needing dessert. Why do I need dessert? And we start to blame ourselves, right? We start to really get down on ourselves and feel like failures and feel like, again, like we're broken or there's something wrong with us. And I just want to remind everybody listening, that's not the case, right? There is a world and an industry that is seriously spending billions of dollars on scanning brains, testing certain molecules, finding new combinations of sugars and sweeteners and chemicals to put in your food to literally keep your tongue and your brain hooked on the crap. So that is not to take your power away. That is to understand that this is what we're up against. This is the facts. This is acceptance of the world that we live in, where we're taught to use food for everything. We're physically addicted, and we can use that information and decide, right, to take our power back and say, no, I'm not going to engage in that, right? I'm not going to fall for that advertisement that tells me to eat cupcakes when I'm feeling sad, right? Or I'm not going to fall for that scene in the movie where the girl gets dumped and she's pounding a bottle of wine, right? Like, I'm not going to engage in that because I can very clearly see what they're trying to do to me there. So we can choose, right? We can be empowered. We can take that horrible information of what's really going on, in terms of why our society is so addicted to sugar, and then we can do something about it. There's so much that we can do, right? And take our power back in that.
Yeah, I like that. And I think pretty much everything you said about the addiction piece aligns with how I approach it. The one thing I think is interesting is the point before we recognize it's a problem. So when you said, it's this thing that I don't want to keep doing, but I'm doing it. I think in the beginning, whether that is the messaging, the sort of like, oh, but this is normal, this is healthy, or because the other parts of our life feel like they're such shit at the break of like, I'm just going to have this like glass of wine. And, I think about Scandal. If anybody watched that show, like she'd come home and she'd just drink wine and eat popcorn and she never ate a real meal. I also struggle. I think my husband always jokes. He's like, you find all these little things in shows that like, they just don't show you because it doesn't matter. But I'm like, when is the last time they drank a glass of water? Like they are not hydrated. We are not seeing this, happening. And so, but it's this idea of, I think in the beginning, we believe we're fine. Even like hard drugs. Someone's like, I can do this and still be okay. There's a degree of, I think, distancing of the self from it being problematic for me. Sure, other people struggle with eating too much. Other people struggle with drugs. I will be okay. And I'm just doing it in this way. So there's this initial like brain wiring that happens there that then I think it happens long enough or there's enough lag time where then that cycle you can describe where it's obsession, compulsion, just happening on repeat. And eventually you go, what the fuck? Like, I hate this. I remember getting to a point where I was like, I am single-handedly keeping the Post-it note company in business because I would write again, come up with a new plan for when I could eat, how much I could eat, how many calories I had taken in, what that could look like. If I do want to go get ice cream, here's everything I have to do to plan for it so that I could binge on it and feel okay. Like all of this behavior. But there's a point in the beginning where you don't see it as a problem because it's acting as the savior against or the protection from whatever the deeper thing is. And so I'm curious because you're right. We live in a world where access to these highly addictive things, again, whether it's substances, sugar, whatever it is, it's there. And like you said, we are existing in a world where I would want to believe we could make a change in the next few years. And that's not going to be the way that big pharma and big ag and all this stuff is going to work. It's not. It's going to continue to be this thing. So it's really taking that information and then considering what we do with it. But let's add in that third piece, because you see your clients and typically it's not just, well, I bought the food I thought was right for me and I was trying to live into this. There's something underneath that. And so tell me, what makes the clients you've worked with, the people you see, what makes us ripe for that kind of pull where we then do get stuck in that addiction?
Yes. Okay. Let's get into this because this is really my passion and really where I focus is what I call the inner work, right? I know you do a lot of this, right? With your clients is really understanding. I've been working with clients in this space now for over 7 years. And in the first few years, I was really focusing on those surface level pieces, right? I kind of think of the iceberg, like, what's above the water is like meal planning, right? And trying to eat whole real foods and, switching to organic and like getting up and going for a run every morning, like these very tangible 3D action items, right? Even building new habits, right? Around food, right? Having a food plan or having structure to eat at certain times, like all of these like things are us sort of feeling like we're making progress or doing things without actually getting to the root cause. So when it comes to addiction, and I'm a huge fan, anybody listening who knows Gabor Mate, I follow a lot of his work and I've seen a lot of like what he's discovered in understanding that the root of addiction is actually rooted in trauma. And more, specifically, it's actually rooted in our nervous system and in our body. So what I've seen, and actually since you and I chatted last, Kira, I've done some training as a somatic embodiment coach. So I've been doing some somatic training. So has my husband, and we're getting more into that work. And I've started building that more into my work with my clients, understanding that this isn't just a head problem. This isn't just a mindset problem. This isn't about just finding a new mantra or even changing our belief systems, which is an important part, but it's deeper. It's what's actually been stored in our nervous system. And for most of us, and I'm giving like the really simple explanation of it here, for most of us at some point, and especially in our childhood or upbringing, there was an imprint in our nervous system that we're not safe to be in our body. And more importantly, we're not safe to feel emotions. So here we are as adults now not feeling safe when a heavy emotion comes up or when life gets hard, and we immediately need to escape. So this is the pattern with any addiction. In my opinion, the research that I followed, again, like all the research Gabor Mate has done, is understanding that I'm not safe, right? It's not safe to be me, to be my authentic self. right? That is also a sad fact of the society that we live in. And it's not safe to feel and express emotions, right? And ultimately it's not safe to be in my body. So then we begin this life of doing everything we can to not be in our body, right? To not feel pain emotionally or physically, right? So whether that is binging on sugar to feel a temporary happiness high, right? Or it's drinking wine at the end of the day, or staying busy all the time is also an addiction that I definitely had. I was like, I'm just going to distract myself all the time because then I don't have to be present with what's really going on, right? And the sadness that I'm feeling, or the depression, or the grief, I can just distract, right? And stay out of my body, stay in my head as much as possible, and like leave the body out of it. So this, in my opinion, is really where I see the root of like these addictive patternings, right? And this is what makes us as a society ripe, as you said, right, for these sales tactics and sugar and food to come in and fill that void, right? To help us escape, help us cope, help us numb out, and help us just forget that there's a lot of pain going on in the body that we haven't addressed. So there's obviously a lot of pieces that kind of go on underneath that we need to look at, but ultimately it is learning how to come back into the body and to regulate our nervous system and to feel safe, and to, at a deeper level, both in the body and the mind, repattern and rewire some of those neural pathways that are, essentially if something gets hard, we have to run, right? Or escape or freeze, right? There's a lot of nervous system responses that definitely show up. So that, I think, that is the biggest piece that people don't understand, right? And so many women, and this drives me crazy. And this is why, like, I'm here to just really hit this home, focus on the food stuff. Right? Focus on just doing a 30-day detox and thinking all their problems will go away, or I just need to avoid wine for 3 months and then my problems will be solved. And every time that pattern will come back because the root cause hasn't been addressed. And there's lots of different nuances to root causes, of course, but that is kind of the overview of what I've seen in my practice and what I fully believe. And I'm curious if you've seen that as well, Kira, if you have any pieces.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote, as you were talking, I'm like, yep, see, this is why we vibe. And I think a lot of it is just different language and views and different trainings coming at the exact same spot, which is something that I think is so cool. My husband is an emergency medicine physician, and he heads up their design thinking and innovation department. And so much of design thinking is basically what I do in the therapy room, just with different words and different constructs. And so I think, yeah, you're describing, I think about this from a cognitive behavioral lens, and we hear about core beliefs and the idea that your core belief is essentially whether or not you're good enough and worthy as you are. And, 0.003% of the population is told, like, yep, you are great exactly as you are. And their brain patterning and the wiring in their body is such that they believe that, they embody that. And there's obviously a subset of that too, that is people that don't have the capacity to connect interpersonally for different, very, severe psychological disorders, things like that. But the rest of us, it's, I'm only good enough and worthy if, and it happens when we're young. And I'm seeing this in, my 3-year-old. So we know shame is an emotion. We know that it's here, it's present. Everyone experiences it. We all experience that threat to connection and belonging. And I watch it in her. I watch the moment she gets embarrassed, and it moves from embarrassment, which is something we can kind of laugh at, recognize there's a universality, move through it, to shame. Everybody's seeing me. I'm going to be rejected. No one's going to want me around. Or I'm feeling this emotion that I don't know what to do with. And so I have to mask it. And that masking it is oftentimes when they're 3, that's where the hitting, the biting, the kicking, it's a physical thing because I don't know what to do with this thing and it's in my body and I just have to get it out. Or they avoid. And then the parents or the caregivers do that as well. Either we focus on the expression of the behavior, the hitting, the kicking, which is not the actual issue. It's whatever you were feeling led you to think that was your only option. We still don't get to hit or kick. And what happened that led to that? Or they kind of collude with the avoidance, the distraction. Let's just distract them out of that. And so those moments that this very normal, very real thing is happening, where someone feels seen, someone feels out of place, they're afraid of being judged, even by the people they feel safest with, we are inadvertently conditioning them to repeat those avoidance strategies. And then it happens in more overt ways too, where it's, a parent maybe it is a true like big T trauma, but it could be little things too. Like you become the kid that's always the problem. You've always got something going on. So now you're absorbing that, or your parents are constantly making you great and amazing and everything you do, it turns to gold. And then it's like, well, I better not show any moment of weakness because that's who I have to be. So you see all of this and it gets bigger and bigger. And when I think about kind of how that manifests as we get older, that builds the foundation to say, so this is who you have to be in the world to be good enough. This is your rule book. And this is where shame gets all of its power. It's here is everything. If you can look this way, act this way, be this way, do these things, you will be fine. Because a lot of the women that you're working with, that 30-day detox, that I've just got to kick off wine, I've got to do this, it's oftentimes motivated to lose weight, to feel more in control, to keep achieving at some level. It's still hooked to external factors because shame is completely linked to that. Instead of saying, what is going on underneath? What is the pain? And so I then kind of think about it as like erupting volcanoes. So that surface tension, and it comes up, and then this is the current volcano erupting. Again, it could be, for my mom, it was a cocaine addiction. For me, it was an eating disorder, and then being busy and sort of the chase for perfection and all of those things. Well, we can stop that. And I'll often say that to clients when they come in, is like, I could stop you, or you could stop you. We could do it together, binging and purging in a few weeks. But that is temporary. And that's not the problem. That's not why you're here. And so I think it's the same for you of like, we could do that. I could write you a great meal plan. And if you just want to follow this for the rest of your life, like you'd be fine, but you're going to find a new space, whether that's with food or something else, because your body and your emotional self are trying to communicate with you. They need something more. They need you to reconnect. They need you to come back home to yourself. So yes, in short, I'm agreeing with all of this. And I think a big thing that you hit on is what a lot of people now talk about is body trust. Like we need to learn to trust our body and to trust our emotions, but also our body needs the opportunity to learn to trust us again too, because it doesn't trust that we aren't going to kind of override it and tell it, well, you don't get to be tired. You don't get to be hungry. You have to follow this diet. You can't do this. And so it's a lot of, at least in my mindset, kind of relearning how to trust and to flow from both sides.
Yeah, for sure. So beautifully said. I really want to add here, because I think you're saying this, but in slightly different terms, is one of the things that's going on. You mentioned this a few different ways. Is this disconnection from self? Right. This happens at a very young age. Like you said, right. We're taught sort of how to behave, what to do in order to get that love and acceptance, right. To feel worthy, to feel like we're enough. Right. And our bodies and brains are brilliant as children. We know what we need to do to adapt, to not upset mom, or to get the praise that we need, right? To feel that sense of unconditional love and worth. We start to really adapt. And Gabor talks a lot about this being sort of like attachment versus authenticity. So these are two basic human needs that come into actually having to make a choice. Are we going to be our true authentic self, or are we going to be liked? And this is like for most of us in this world that we grew up in, we had to make that choice at a young age. And being liked is a higher priority on the scale of survival. So we will always blend in. We will need to blend in. We will need to make sure mom's happy so that she's not mad at us. We need to get good grades. We need to make sure everybody's happy around us, take on emotional responsibility for other people. We start doing that whole people pleasing developing early. And what happens is we forget who we truly are, right? We start to learn how to live in the box, and our society is really great at training us to do that, right? School is a breeding ground for teaching you exactly how to behave. Be a good girl. Good girls don't cry, right? Good girls raise their hand when they have a question, right? Like the social conditioning starts young, right? And it really teaches a young mind, me, right? All of us to be a certain way in order to survive and fit in our society. And this is a really huge, primitive need And in that process, we actually disassociate and disconnect from our true selves. A lot of the work that I'm doing now with my clients and even with myself is really acknowledging, and this is where identity crises come from, right? We get midlife and we're like, who am I? Like, what am I even doing? Right. And then we do crazy things because we have no idea who we are.
Right.
So a lot of this process is really relearning like who you are and learning to love that part of you, right? And learning to acknowledge your differences and your weirdness and your silliness and your your true essence. And that is quite a difficult process, but it is one of the big things that I focus on with my clients, because when we are living we're living someone else's life, right? When we're not being true to ourselves, right? We're not in our own beliefs, our own values, right? We've just taken them from what we should believe or what we should value, right? And we start living again, this half life, and we can't fully be in our power, fully free, coming back to those words I mentioned earlier. And we will continue to fill a void, right? There's this void of like, I don't even know who I am. I'm miserable, right? Whether or not you acknowledge it or not, this disconnection from the body and from our true selves that food is very conveniently filling for most people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think about this as you're describing it too, of this idea of, so if we break it down even more between authenticity and attachment, is there's then the difference between belonging and fitting in. And I think a lot of us don't quite understand the difference in that. And we're really, I think about this even when I was first doing my internship year, and when you're learning to be a therapist, there's obviously, you have to do therapy and be seen and be watched, which is, for a perfectionist, that is like, I've always got to be perfect. It's the worst experience because people are watching you, and the goal is to find everything that you could improve on or learn or explore because you want to learn how to be better. Yeah. But I have learned how to be the best and to be perfect in the room, not because I think I'm the best, because I feel like my shame has told me that is the only way I'm allowed to be in the room. I can't have a flaw or I don't deserve to be there. But when we were going through this, one of the biggest things that I would get feedback on is you've got to leave more space for emotion. You've got to be silent longer. You've got to let them sit in it longer. And which kind of opened the door to me of, I have to sit in it longer. And I think the big thing that happens is, for many of us, the easier route is fitting in, because you'll find that sense of false camaraderie, but camaraderie nonetheless, right away. Allowing yourself space to find your group, find yourself, figure out what you want, to truly consider what belonging looks like takes time. The same as we, every moment. So if we've had it as kids, as we get older, it's, I can't tolerate that distress. I had a hard day at work. That's too overwhelming. I couldn't possibly come down from that on my own and be okay. So I need the Netflix and the ice cream. I need to take a hit of X, Y, and Z. I have to do that to be okay, because we lose that ability to trust we can move through it and to be in the space of that discomfort. And so it sounds like for you, a lot of the work you have to start doing with clients is not only to help them, kind of part one is probably like the similar vibe of, I hear you that you want a meal plan and you want to do these things and you think these are the fixes, and getting them to buy in a little bit deeper. So that's, kind of part one. But once they do, a lot of that is conditioning that distress tolerance and sitting in the discomfort and feeling it without feeling like it is the number one vulnerability that's going to lead to rejection and being seen as weak, being seen as whatever it might be. And so how do you do that with them? What is your sort of approach? How do you make that space?
Yeah. So, in my terminology, what we're talking about here is making friends with your feelings, right? So, this is really about, like I talked about earlier, learning in the body how to feel safe when you are feeling an intense emotion. So, for example, I just went through a very intense week, pretty much a good solid week, and I'm still going through it, of grief. We had some kittens pass away, and it was really intense and really a lot to feel. And because I have practice and resources, I can go into feeling all of that. Most people cannot. It's a lot, right? And so practicing and to answer your question with my clients, it's really about encouraging them to make pockets of time throughout their day to just be in connection with whatever is alive in their body in that moment, right? Whatever is actually feeling. Or an easier access point for many people is noticing when you get triggered, right? Throughout the day, when you're like, oh, I'm frustrated, or oh, I'm feeling really stressed, or I'm feeling really overwhelmed, like just noticing when that comes up. And it may not even be an emotion, by the way. Most of the women I work with are so disconnected from their emotional body that they don't even know what an emotion is. So there we would be starting with bringing back sensations into the body, right? So is your jaw tight? Is there a pain in your hip, right? Are your shoulders crunched up? Really just starting to notice maybe there's like a heaviness in your chest. So that's kind of stepping back, baby step for there. But then it's about really committing to taking even a couple minutes to be with that emotion, right? So having some sort of safe space in your house, maybe your cars are great for this, right? You can be alone and just like, having your hand on your heart, hand on your belly, breathing, connecting to your breath, being present. Like, what does this stress feel like in my body? Right. And bringing in some supportive chat to repattern all these toxic beliefs we have around how it's not safe to feel stressed or anxious or depressed, right? Or grief. And bringing in like, this is good for me to feel. This is really safe for me to feel. I welcome this grief, right? And letting the tears flow if they're there for you, right? Just allowing that expression to be there. And then you can get on with your day, right? I think this is for most people needs to be really baby stepped into, because feeling the full brunt of an anxiety attack or grief is like, that's re-traumatizing and we don't want to do that, right? So we need to get slowly into that. And exactly like you said, it really is about creating the space, AKA the time, and physically like a safe space for you to like sit, right? To have a spot on the couch where you can just sit, close your eyes, connect to your breath, and just take 5 minutes to be with whatever's there. And over time, that will become easier, right? And you'll notice that you begin to panic less when those emotions come up, right? And it's about creating that level of safety in your body, and working with someone, like yourself or like me or someone else, like is really important and really helpful in getting into creating that space. Because sometimes it can be really hard on our own when our protectors are there and when all the fear is there and all the pattern of this is not safe, escape, is on repeat. That can be really hard to break through on your own, but not impossible. So that's definitely, how I approach it with my clients, is really starting to bring in this new belief system and understanding that emotions are really important to feel, and beginning the practice of actually building a relationship with them. Right. And then we can get into actually processing emotions and moving the energy out of the body. And there's lots of techniques for that, which is really fun. But at the ground level, we need to just learn that they're welcome and they're okay, right? Validate. Right.
Yeah.
I like to think of emotions, especially the big emotions, are just a kid in the grocery store having a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
Like, all they need is attention and validation. And every time I see this, I love this in my groups and with my clients that I host. Like, wow, I was feeling really anxious and I just sat with it for a minute and then it went away. I'm like, yeah, that's because all it needed was just to be seen and heard, like a little child, right? Who's throwing a temper tantrum. So that might be a good reference for some of us. Like, we just need to feel it. To be with it for, sometimes it's just a minute and then it's gone. Oh, okay, cool. And yes, sometimes it lasts a lot longer, but that's okay.
Well, and I think what you're describing is, ultimately building the insight into what's going on and how you experience it in the body. And I think a big thing that we have to come back to is we are emotional beings who've developed high functioning thought. We are not thought-based beings that have just these inconvenient emotions that show up. Like, we are at our core meant to experience the world through our physical body, through our emotions. And when we stuff them down, you leave the cycle of experiencing emotions incomplete. And for a lot of people, it's, well, I only want to feel this feeling. I only want to feel happy. I only want to feel joy. I only want to feel contentment or fulfillment or whatever it is they think that they're chasing. But that is not a possible way to exist. We all experience emotions on a spectrum and they're neutral. And so it sounds like a lot of what you're trying to help do too is create that sense of neutrality and curiosity. There is nothing, even before we started recording, and I said, one of the things that I love is when I surround myself with people like you, when I say, how are you doing? Where it's not fake, it's not fine, but fine is what so many of us feel like we have to be every day. And fine is just a place of disconnection. And so I think a lot of that sounds like it's key. A lot of even just learning what an emotion is, what that feels like, the connection to the body. And then again, getting to that place where you move through them, which it sounds like is kind of phase 2 for you, that processing, that getting the body through that full feeling cycle so that you can kind of release all the backlog of feeling. And for a lot of us in the beginning, it is heavy. It's a ton of grief, pain, loss, anger, sadness, fear. But the goal being, and this is where I think a lot of people struggle, because again, we've got quick fixes popping up in our periphery all the time. Like I just joined a gym. It's a fantastic place. I love the community that they're building here. It's a lot less about like, nobody's talking about weight and macros, and the pictures of people are actually people in all different body size. And it doesn't feel like tokenism. Like there's a lot of elements to it that I appreciate. And you still see the subliminal messaging that comes through. Like it's just there. And so no matter how hard we work, the answers are always going to be there to just go to this easier thing. So you can get on with being busy and achieving and succeeding, because busyness is still at the forefront of our dominant social capital. That's our worth and our value is in being fine and being busy. And so, one of the things that I think people struggle with whether they meet me in like a workshop or one-on-one coaching is, I think there's a freedom in it, to go back to your word from the beginning, but also a sense of kind of stuckness in this idea that this work is iterative and it's never done. Like we will be rewiring brain patterns and coming home to ourselves for the rest of our life. And so how do you kind of explain that and create openness for your clients, again, who are like, well, I just have to check this off the list. I have to just be better about sugar so I can be fine. How do you give them that curiosity and that sort of openness, or help them cultivate that as they think about this being a lifelong process?
Yeah, for sure. And it is. And that can be a really tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. Right. And so how I explain it and really share, at least, my own lived experience, what I see with clients is like in the beginning, yes, it's a lot of hard work and it's uncomfortable and it's awkward and it's painful and it's horrible, but that part doesn't last forever. Right. I don't have kids yet, but I know my closest friend does. And she was saying that same thing, right? With her young one. She's like, this is just a phase, right? It's really hard right now. He's young. She's got a 2-year-old, right? But it's just a phase. It's going to get easier. It's going to shift. It's going to change. So when we, do some of the biggest work in the first few years of really diving into some inner healing, right? After that, you'll notice a shift at some point and continual shift. Like, I notice how much easier it is now for me to be in my emotions, right? And to just like do what I need to do to take a week off work and grieve, right? Like I did just a few weeks ago, right? Like I know what I need to do. I can do it. It's not like this difficult thing that I have to do. And I know that even while I'm in a difficult emotion like grief, I'm okay. And I'll get through it. I'm in it and I'm feeling miserable and horrible. And I'm like, I know this is okay and I'll be okay and it'll end soon. Right. So it's really about changing the way that we see like these end goals in life. Right. Like there is this, we do live in this society, like you've already said, right. Where it's about just achieving this one thing, checking it off the list, like, get over sugar addiction, check, like get that job, check. But we're always growing and evolving. That's literally our purpose on the planet as humans, right? And the sooner you embrace that process, and like you said, bring in the curiosity, which is a big word that I use with a lot of my clients, it can actually become fun. Discovering my true authentic self has actually involved a lot of play, like going to the playground and like doing some crafts and like eating with my hands and reconnecting with my inner child. And like this stuff is fun. Right. Or exploring new relationships, new friendships with people who actually get you, right? Going to new events, like, finding new interests. Like a lot of this work can be really fun and rewarding. And whenever I go into, a healing session or medicine work that I do, and I go in, I'm actually really looking forward to it. I'm kind of in this mindset now where like, bring it on, teach me subconscious, like what else do you got to process? Like it's almost, I cautiously use this word addiction. It's almost like this personal growth and healing addiction where it's like, I love learning about myself. I love finding areas where, oh, that's still a wound that I need to work on. Right. And okay, how am I going to unpack that? Right. So it becomes so much easier and we get to a place where we can embrace that this is the journey. And it's almost like, I can't wait to see what I'm going to learn about myself this year. Like, oh, what wounds are ready to be healed next? And like when we approach it like that, it becomes fun, right? And it becomes not effortless. There's definitely still a lot of pain. There's still a lot of challenges, but when you are well resourced and you know within your body that you're safe to feel those things and that you have the community, you have your people, right? I've got my support network, right? I know who I need to go and process things with and I can lean on. So, making sure that you've got all those resources in place, it doesn't have to be hard. So
Right.
that's kind of, the conversation I have with my clients so that they can embrace and surrender to this being a process of life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we're always evolving and your needs are changing and your desires are changing. And even sometimes your values are changing, right? As you change in life.
Well, and I think a lot of it too, then is for so many people that are those high performing, high achieving, perfectionist, everything, and that's the people you and I are a lot of times getting in the door. And so a big part of it is also you're not getting graded here. And so I think it's a releasing of that, because I think a lot of times people come in and it's, I've got to abstain from sugar and I can never use sugar in an unhealthy way or a maladaptive way ever again. And this is the plan. And this is what I have to do. And the reality is you might. Like I still sometimes make decisions motivated by my poor body image. I still sometimes want to hide. I still sometimes feel like I'm not allowed to eat something because of how I feel in my body. The difference being I can approach those feelings with more of a neutrality. So I don't get lost in shame layered on shame. So when you do, and I think that's a lot of the work with people is, gosh, you're still going to sometimes eat sugar as a means of hiding and avoiding. And if you can get to that place where you can find a sense of kind of neutrality around it and that like, oh, I can make peace with that. There are times that I'm sometimes going to eat too much, eat too little, not listen to my body. I'm going to overindulge, underindulge, stay in a relationship too long, put myself in a position where I'm triggered like that. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to constantly show up for the self in that. And I think that's really where you and I kind of cross paths most directly, is that the building of resilience in the process of what we're doing to say, when these things happen again, when that next point or trigger or relationship comes up that puts you back to that place you feel like you have to run or hide or you're failing and you feel yourself going there, it's going to change. And you might still do the behavior. You might still engage with those things because again, we aren't trying to stop the behavior as our root thing. The behavior is the extension of healing those root pain points. And so it might still happen. Like I've taught, again, my 3-year-old, she is full blown temper tantrum stage right now. I have probably one of the most, like there are things she says, like she came in the other day when we had people visiting and she had never met them before. They were people my husband works with. And she came in and she goes, Mom, I'm feeling anxious because I don't know the people at our house right now. And I was like, okay. She said, it's making me feel sad and mad. Okay. Wow. And I looked at her like, who the fuck are you? Like a part of me is like, of course, amazing. Like I did this. And then there's the part of me that's like, oh my gosh, look at her. And then, the next day she had a big feeling and she took it out by like throwing her stuffed animals around the room because she didn't know what to do with that. She's not going to be able to articulate every single feeling in every given moment. And I don't only praise her for that and then shit on her every time she like doesn't know how to handle a feeling. Her brain is not that different from ours. Our brains as adults do the same thing. Sometimes we just don't know how to deal with what we're feeling. And she might deal with it by yelling or by like, we've taught her now, like you don't put your hands on people, you don't put your hands in places. But again, you see it. The reason why all kids 2, 3, 4, 5 struggle with that is they're trying to figure out how to be in their body where big feelings are happening and they don't know how to deal with it. Yeah. So we're going to go through those same things. And there are going to be times where you metaphorically put your hands out and you hit at someone or you swing at something. And that might be being an asshole to your partner or to your friend. That might be grabbing a pint of ice cream. That might be getting, stoned at the end of the day. Then come back to that the next day and don't make that decision. It's all or nothing. And I think that's the big thing of like, so now let's get curious. Let's take the judgment out. Like, so what, you did it. You're going to do it again. It's going to happen. You and I are on this work still learning how to do the stuff we're teaching people. And so it sounds like, again, there's this kind of collaborative work that we're both doing to give people the space to say humanity is a journey of imperfection and exploration. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious when you think about this, as we're unfolding this, a lot of people coming in listening are like, all right, we're talking sugar addiction. So I'm going to leave this episode knowing, all right, here's how I fix it. Here's what I do. We didn't do any of that. And so there's also still that like needing to satisfy a bit of, well, what do I do next? Because this concept, we're comfortable with this. We're comfortable staying in the openness, the big, the gray, because we know that's where the work needs to be done. But for people listening to this and going, okay, so what you're telling me is I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. I'm still going to struggle. You're not going to give me a meal plan and a quick fix, and sugar's always going to be there. Cool. So what do I do? So what would you say is that, like, if people took nothing but like this one next step, this one invitation, what can we leave them with?
Yeah, such a good question. I'm going to answer it, but I really want to comment on what you were just sharing because I feel it's really important. So I'm just going to put a pin in that question for a second and come back because this perfectionism piece, and I really want to highlight that as well. I'm not perfect, right? And I love how you explained that and shared that because that is, and actually in my programs with my clients, we have an actual plan, like planning to fail almost. Like, what are you going to do when you slip up or when you go off plan? Because it's going to happen. How are you going to support yourself? What are you going to tell yourself? Because that, to me, that's the definition of success, especially when it comes to sugar addiction. It's not about never eating sugar again or always being perfect. It's about how quickly we can get back up and not beat ourselves up when life happens. Right. And I'm still in that too. I mean, even as proud as I am of how much I felt and I went into this last sort of big wave of emotions and grief, and there was all sorts of other things stacked on top, there was still 2 or 3 nights that I chose to have a glass of wine. Right. And I was like, oh, whatever. And watch Netflix. Like that's kind of my go-to now that I don't usually eat food or drink. It's like, oh, I'll like numb out on Netflix. And for me, it's all about being aware and intentional. So I actually talk about this with my clients is being almost like intentionally numbing out, being like, I have been feeling a lot and I just need a break and that's okay. And I'm going to watch a movie or I'm going to have this one glass of wine. Right. And it's about really just, I think the intention behind it is so huge because then it becomes an act of almost self-love. Right. And I know that might sound weird. Like how can an act of self-love be choosing to have a glass of wine and a brownie and watch Netflix? But it can be when the intention behind it is just to give ourselves a little bit of a break or to just allow ourselves to be human. Right. And I think it's when we're doing that every day for everyday things that it becomes a problem. Right. And when we're mindless about it and we have no control over it. But when we actually choose, like it comes from a place of, I'm going to choose to watch a movie right now, take a break from this intense grief. I've been crying all day. I need a damn break and go for a walk, come home, have a glass of wine, watch a movie. And like, for me, that is me exercising my freedom. You know, I really believe in freedom, and I've gotten to a place where I can do that with food. Not everybody can, and I get that. But for me, that is a big value and a big important part with like being aware of when is it getting slippery slope, and when is it something that I am being intentional about, just checking out for a minute. And there's nothing wrong with like sometimes needing to just check out, right? Being present all the time isn't always the kindest thing. It can be draining and exhausting. Yeah. And I mean, like it's okay to take a time out, right? Once in a while. And to do that with intention, I feel like that's the way I've navigated it. And acknowledging that exactly like you said, this isn't about being perfect and never doing something again or, and I love that the saying, right? There's no such thing as failing. You either learn or you grow, right? Or you get what you want or you grow. Right. And I believe that. And that's something I really instill in my clients because a lot of this brings up that failure, right? Like I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. So instead, if you have a night where you binge or a night where, oh crap, I just like couldn't resist and I, went at it the next day, like you said, it's for me, I teach my clients to get really introspective about that. Like fascinating. Okay. I binged last night. Like what was going on?
Yeah.
Like what was happening like at the root? Like, why did that show up for me when I'd, been good for the last couple of weeks or whatever, or not been good, but I'd eaten, in the way that nourished me the last 2 weeks. So it's about learning and taking the lessons from like, oh, what was going on there? Right? Like, why did that monster come back last night? Right. And oh, interesting. Okay. I talked to my mom and she said something triggering and, oh, I get it now. I see where that came from. There's a wound there for me to work on. Like we can use that as information to continue our path and our healing, right? Without getting stuck in the guilt and shame. Just being like, oh, I'm a human, right? I feel like crap today. That was the reminder that I needed to not do that again. Right?
Yeah.
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 So,
and then to know if that's your red flag, you can walk it back to say, so what were the yellow flags? Like you said, the call with mom, there's something else. And that's that shift to where did my body lose the capacity? And was there something I could notice? Was it even about the conversation with mom, or was it the fact that I have been on and I haven't given myself a break for those 2 or 3 weeks? And I've been expecting so much of me now that I'm doing these things that maybe that's the yellow flag. And so it is about saying, gosh, nothing is as simple as we make it. And it's, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. 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 There's a lot of layers to that. So I think that was really important that you brought that up. And I wanted to kind of weigh into that. So getting onto the question that you actually asked around, like, what are the next steps here? Right. And I so appreciate this conversation. This has been amazing, Kira. So it really depends where everybody's at, right? If this is something that you've never really looked at before, in terms of understanding, oh, maybe I do have a dependency with sugar. And a lot of people actually don't resonate with the word addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It might be dependency, right? Or I feel out of control with sugar, or my sugar cravings are ruling my thoughts in my day. So whatever like resonates with you, this is the same conversation that we're having here. So number one is to really begin that journey of curiosity, right? And really, as much as you can, becoming an investigator in your own life and in your relationship with food. This isn't about calling yourself a bad for eating a brownie, or, oh, I'm so horrible, for eating all this, going to McDonald's today. And this is about just observing. Right? This is base level awareness. It's like being really curious. Wow, isn't that fascinating? I go to McDonald's every day after work. Or isn't that fascinating that I feel like I need a glass of wine when I come home every day? Right? Mm-hmm. Or that, I need to start my day with a donut, right? So just starting to notice with curiosity your patterns. And then also another one of the things that we didn't talk about, this is kind of a physical 3D reality piece, but is important because sugar addiction is also very physical. There is definitely things going on in our brain when we eat sugar, but would be to begin educating yourself on where sugar is hiding. Most people have no idea that they're actually overdosing on sugar every day and perpetuating that addictive physical addiction from, changing our gut bacteria microbiome to the brain chemicals that get released. Most people think that they're eating healthy, right? That was me as well. I'm like, well, I vanilla yogurt and granola and fresh fruit for breakfast. And, having this like kale salad with dressing that, of course, I found out later was loaded with sugar, right? We think we're doing all these good things and eating all these good foods. But when you start actually looking at your sugar intake, even if you just track added sugars, right? Mm-hmm. Most of you will be shocked and surprised. I have this every time I host my Break Free from Sugar group program. That's like action item for week 1 is like track your sugar for 3 days. Just track it. Curiously track it. No judgment, no augmenting what you're eating. And most people think that they're eating a lot less. And everyone is surprised. Oh my goodness, just for breakfast, I eat my daily allotted, like safe amount of sugar. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to do that, so bringing awareness to like, we can't change what we can't track. My business mentor says that. That's kind of a business thing, but it works here too, right? If you don't actually face the facts and the awareness around how much sugar you're eating, how much you're feeding that addictive cycle, then it's really hard to change because we'll live in the, like you talked about earlier, that phase where you're like, that's not really a problem. I don't eat that much sugar. I'm not really addicted. It's all good. But when we actually face the hard truth, right, that most of us need to face, like, oh my goodness, I'm having 200 grams of sugar a day. Wow, this is a problem, right? It can help us sort of accept that, right? And get to that place where we maybe become ready to do something about it. So I would say for first steps, those are the 2 most important. Really starting to observe and be curious about what's going on. When are you eating? And more importantly, what are you feeling when you eat? So this is kind of an added piece that's really important here is, and an activity that I have to get my clients to do is before you eat anything, just pause for 30 seconds and check in with your body. Are you feeling tight in your chest? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling joyful and celebratory? Are you feeling, what are you feeling? Mm-hmm. And we can start to get those connections to notice like, well, every time I feel tight in my chest, I reach for food, right? And then we can start understanding, well, what's going on there, right? And we can go layers deeper. But again, that awareness piece is level 1.
I love this. And a lot of people listening are going to be thinking about, okay, this is great. I now feel like I have a handle, and I want Danielle. I want to work with her. I want to do this. So you mentioned your program. You have tons of other things that you do. Where can people find you? How can they connect? Whether they're just sort of dosing a little bit in this world and, or they're ready to go all in, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that. I would say the best place is my podcast. Actually, anybody who wants to keep this conversation going deeper, come and listen to obviously Kira's interview on the show. It's called the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. And that is really my weekly podcast where I dive deep into a lot of these layers, and I bring on amazing guests and experts like Kira. And we go deep into the root causes around food addiction and sugar addiction and have all sorts of amazing conversations. Another great resource would be heading over to my website, danielledame.com. I have some free resources there as well. You can download. I have a 3-part video series diving into the emotional component. So emotional eating, rewiring, those behaviors with the emotional pull around food. A lot of what we talked about today. So you can download that for free, and some other resources there on my website. And then you can find me on all the social channels as well. I've got my podcast goes up on YouTube if anyone prefers to watch the video. I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, Danielle Dame. You can find me.
Awesome.
Reach out. Yeah.
And I will make sure that those are all in the show notes. And I highly encourage you, just even if you're like, this isn't what I experience or what it's going through, like all of us struggle with this in some way, shape, or form, whether you're identifying it as sugar or not. And I've gotten so much out of the different podcast episodes I've listened to on your podcast. I think that so much of just what you're offering is just to continue the conversation and curiosity about us as humans. Again, really part of it, sure, talking about sugar, but it is so many more things to that. It's really about, again, how do we come home to our bodies and really connect with that? And so I highly encourage you all to take a look at that. This has been incredible. I could talk to you for 10 more hours. I feel like this, and we would just be scratching the surface on like session 1 with our clients and like in our own work and kind of where we've gone. So thank you for giving us the gift of your time and your expertise. It's truly been, I think, igniting for people in a way where helping them sort of rediscover and uncover a sense of empowerment and the right that they have to do some of this work. And it was taken from a lot of us when we were little without our awareness, our parents' awareness, whatever that is, but just systems that have kind of kept all of us stuck. And so I appreciate you just creating those invitations for us to look at it differently and show up and kind of give our bodies and our minds and our hearts a place for healing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, Kira. This was so fun. I ditto. I absolutely love talking with you. And I feel like we could talk for 10 hours, which is why I'm having you back on my show as well. Like round 2.
Yeah.
So there's so much to talk about. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing in the world. And I hope everybody listening to this really got at least one thing out of what we're sharing. And that's ultimately the last message that I want to leave is like, this can be a big, scary journey. It can feel like a lot, and overwhelm can lead to shutdown, right? So we don't want that. It really is about just like giving yourself permission to take those baby steps. So maybe this week you commit to just tracking your sugar. This week you just commit to, observing when you eat and how you're feeling. Like, this isn't a race. We've got time. We've got the rest of your life, right? To just navigate into this. And I feel like our society does put that pressure on us, or we put that pressure on ourselves to like, got to get this fixed within 6 months, or I better be healed in a year, right? Or even a month, like 30 days, and I'm never going to have this problem again. And unfortunately, that's just not how it works. So give yourself the grace and the kindness to just compassionately go forward one step at a time. You'll get there.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way for us all to walk away from today. So everybody grab your Post-it notes or your sheet of paper and write down that one thing, whether it's just a kindness to yourself, whether it's that reminder, like Danielle said, that this is a lifelong journey that you get to be on, or if it is that action step of picking something and just showing up to that each day. And when you're ready, we're here. I'm here every Sunday. Danielle's podcast comes out every week. We're both here for you. I'm excited to continue to explore all sorts of different topics about shame with each of you. And I will be back in your inboxes next Sunday.